Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Socially radical. Guitarist.
Так дайте пацанам посчитать потери. Суммы нули погибают на сцене. Снова один прогуляюсь без тени. Заливаю лик, поцелуй на шее. Как там бар, правда назад, черный каскад. Вижу твой взгляд, стебли горят. Мог тебя взять, но ты не моя. Так дайте пацанам посчитать потери. Суммы нули погибают на сцене. Снова один прогуляюсь без тени. Заливаю лик, поцелуй на шее. Как там бар, правда назад, черный каскад. Вижу твой взгляд, стебли горят. Мог тебя взять, но ты не моя. Эти понты покупались в аду. Твои мозги затупились к утру. Так дайте пацанам посчитать потери. Суммы нули погибают на сцене. Снова один прогуляюсь без тени. Заливаю лик, поцелуй на шее. Как там бар, правда назад, черный каскад. Вижу твой взгляд, стебли горят. Мог тебя взять, но ты не моя. Так дайте пацанам посчитать потери. Суммы нули погибают на сцене. Снова один прогуляюсь без тени. Заливаю лик, поцелуй на шее. Как там бар, правда назад, черный каскад. Вижу твой взгляд, стебли горят. Мог тебя взять, но ты не моя.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the new year of the Socially Radical Guitarist. Song you heard just now was Polozhenie, and this is actually a remix of the original song by Scriptonic, and it's done by Zedline. So I'm highlighting Zedline's work. So just before I get into what he did with this track and why it's so interesting, just going to do the disclaimer. Anything that I say in the show or anything that my guests say on the show are the respective opinions of the host and the guests. They have nothing to do with Radio Waterloo, any of its subsidiaries, or any of its affiliates. So no, try as you might, you cannot sue public radio over this program. And yes, while the African and Caribbean Inclusion Center does sponsor this show, the expressed opinions of the guest are, and the hosts are the opinions of the host and the guest only. They have nothing to do with the nonprofit either. So, don't sue the nonprofit. Support the nonprofit. Especially support the African and Caribbean Inclusion Center's full inclusion, full integration, full equality initiative. It's very important for refugees when they come here to be equal. And That's the goal of the organization, and we hope that all of our listeners support. Now, I wanted to do this song just because I noticed something interesting about where Zedline's career is going. I mean, if you use Spotify as a metric, this song seems to be the only thing really holding up his monthly views to what I would deem an underappreciated level. So about 600,000. The song gets a lot of listens. It's a lot like some of Circus Survive songs, where you have some songs with a lot of listens. But the rest of his tracks just not getting any notoriety. They're not quite as bad. It's not like they're completely inferior to the rest. I just maybe the audiences that he has just aren't resonating with those other tracks, and maybe this is just my bias. But if I could make a suggestion, Zedline, maybe you try using the guitar again, because I think it's the only one where he does use the guitar and integrates it into his music. So that's probably why that song ends up being the only one that sticks out. So let's just go through how he takes the original song and just changes it up completely. It's a totally distinct, totally new song. It really doesn't follow. You can't recognize any of the original song with this remix, and the change up that he does is actually quite beautiful. So it's actually an octave lower, but I had to go up an octave because it's an E flat, and I don't want to change my tuning. But anyways, yeah, that's the original theme, which is actually similar to the original song. But then he changes up the guitars and really changes up the lyrics. And yeah, that's really those two things, quite simple. I mean, it's an electronic kind of song, but it's the way the guitar is used is particularly distinct, and it gives very interesting flavor to the lyrics and this the song that he's singing. If you look at the translations online, you'll find that it's a very nihilistic message. I was somewhat shocked by that, but at the same time, the music is very beautiful. It pulls at your strings a little bit, and it might resonate with you even more if you're a Russian speaker. But one reason why I wanted to do East European music was to somewhat show solidarity to, the CIS countries that are under scrutiny right now. I think it's what NATO was seen as the weak point in the Russia-China axis, if you will, the axis of evil that the U.S. and Canada and the other NATO countries have declared in their summit for democracy. A lot of the smaller countries came really just to talk about, liberal democratic values, that kind of nonsense. Guyana, to its credit, went over there to say that we need to look after the social issues and social rights in order to preserve and defend democracy. So that was an important message that they brought up when they went over there. Angola looked like they were being held hostage going over there. I mean, they had the whole Isabella dos Santos thing going on, and that kind of looked like a geopolitical targeting. They also went after Congo Brazzaville, so the Republic of Congo, with the same sort of thing where you scrutinize an issue with corruption that's general anywhere, and that was the International Consortium of Journalists and of international journalists. And if you listen to some of the exposés that Max Blumenthal, Ben Norton, and some other anti-imperialist journalists have done, you'll realize that there's a lot of geopolitical considerations with what's going on with these exposures. And it looks like, quite honestly, like they're coordinating with the NSA and the other intelligence agencies, the three-letter agencies. But yeah, since that Summit for Democracy, the Communist Party of Russia immediately sounded the alarm and saying that they're going to try to divide the world in two again, the same way it was during the Cold War. And sure enough, you find Kazakhstan. Now, the leader of the country obviously shot himself in the foot by raising gas prices, I think, 4 times over. I don't think that was the most intelligent tactical decision. But then you find out that the protests come in initially peaceful, then it's the rioting, then you're blowing up buses, blowing up everything, destroying public buildings, and then you notice Radio Free Europe is doing an expose on a champion of human rights, and finding out that he has tremendous problems with state-funded road repair programs. You find that he has an issue with that. That's somehow a problem. So, and then when you look into it a little bit further, you find out he's part of an organization that's affiliated with a bunch of NGOs that were complaining about the national security law for Hong Kong. And yeah, they're all NATO affiliated, and the whole thing just ends up being exposed right then and there. And China didn't miss a beat. They immediately issued out a statement through the Global Times saying, we oppose any attempt at interfering in the internal affairs of Kazakhstan, because that's what's happening. Kazakhstan is under attack by NATO. And yeah, they also issued out a statement in support for Eritrea against the sanctions regime and the other violations of sovereignty that the U.S. and NATO have done to many countries around the world. It's what you see, and it's kind of interesting to see this happen, around the anniversary of the Third World Coup attempt on the United States. A Third World Coup attempt launched by a president of the country. And during that period, I actually was laughing quite a lot There are people still debating now in the United States, mainstream people debating whether this was a coup attempt or not, whether this was an insurrection or not. Um, Anybody looking from the outside has already understood what it was. You had Zimbabwe laughing. They had they had their government owned news channel, and members of the ZANU PF party were talking about how silly this country is. You have a guy saying to peacefully invade the U.S. Capitol. And Kenya, of course, mocked the issue quite well. Had a picture of the man who was sitting on Nancy Pelosi's chair, had his feet up on the table, and that the major headline, what it says is, "Who's the Banana Republic now?" And quite a lot of things were revealed at that point. And on the anniversary, it's another important thing to note that the pandemic is still ongoing. The thing that kind of brought the politics to such a degenerated level was the pandemic and the people's visceral reaction to failed leadership in the pandemic. That was what that vote was. It was a referendum on the current president. And Donald Trump believes that he didn't deserve to be scrutinized in that way, but and also he believed that he never should have really lost to Joe Biden. And then maybe honestly, but if he had done a better job performing with the pandemic, that wouldn't be the case. The pandemic is still ongoing. There's still terrible leadership in the United States. Any conscious African would come to the realization that Joe Biden is really just a clone of Donald Trump. There's no difference between the two. They're both racist beyond repair. They're both mentally not fit. They're too old, both of them. They really shouldn't be in the highest position of office in the world. Age wouldn't necessarily be an issue, but if they're affected by age-related diseases, both of them, then they were not fit. Add on top of the fact that it's the U.S. capitalist fascist system, so you end up with mass deaths. Just Thursday, for example, more than 2,000 people died in one day from a variant that's supposed to be mild. This is a mild variant. Killed 57 people on Thursday, but it's mild. Mild. On the anniversary of the insurrection, the anniversary of the Third World coup attempt, over 2,000 people died from the pandemic in one day in the United States. Nearly 860,000 people overall. In Canada, of course, pandemic is intensifying. And nobody's really doing anything meaningful to stop the spread of the disease, while claiming that they can't do anything. But they've given up on doing anything. They've stopped testing. So these are the state of affairs of a capitalist country that believes it's in a position to export its democracy abroad and to lecture other countries on how they should be conducting themselves. Obviously, that's not the case. But here we are. And that is why I wanted to do this this act of solidarity, dedicate this song. Incidentally, this song is used on a lot of pro-Stalin memes. If you look around different pro Stalin memes, you'll find that whoever says a pro Stalin comment ends up looking like a boss with this song, and that's kind of the point. And that's why I wanted to do Polozhenie, because people have ended up using it in their own way in the internet space, and I felt like should be in solidarity with the youth trying to fight for a genuine country that's actually theirs, that's not under the ownership of either a dictator or NATO, that it's actually genuinely theirs. It belongs to the people, it belongs to the workers. So showing that solidarity is a good thing. The next song that's going to be coming up is a good one. It's the last song on a very, very beautiful album that you missed. Part of your culture, suppressed. Skyharbor. And it was the original band for Intervals. They went off and they decided to do this project, Skyharbor. The music is very good. Everybody, top player, bass player, drummer, guitarist. Then Daniel Tompkins does a very good job with the singing. So all in all, a collection of beautiful music. And this the 10th last song on the album is called The Constant. And there's actually a featured solo by something that every person that listens to the G-Gen knows and loves. His name is Pline. And you can tell that he's listened to a lot of fusion musicians, to Stevie Vai, to John Petrucci, because that's kind of how he plays. And every song sounds, every solo that he does really goes in line. Like, it's a very musical solo, and it's a very good talent that people want to take and utilize in this sphere, in this musical space. So it's featuring Pline. So it's a very, very beautiful song in that way. So look forward to The Constant from Skyharbor and their album Guiding Lights, featuring Pline. And then we'll have that song during the intermission, and then we'll be right back to talk about the state of 2022, which doesn't look like it's getting any better. But I digress. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Socially Radical Guitarist. The beautiful song you heard just now was The Constant from Skyharbor in their album The Guiding Lights. The song itself features Planet. Great thing about that song is, it's 9 minutes, but it doesn't necessarily feel like 9 minutes. It feels like you're listening to a live performance. So much music, so much stuff going on, and the length. It might irk you to start listening to the song, but when you listen to it, it makes a lot of sense. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, let's get into the the supposed leader that is going to lead the fight for democracy abroad and to stop the world from falling into the hands of the villainous Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. The champion of democracy, the man who calls a black child a cockroach, the man who actually was involved himself in an intra-party coup. This was a candidate that was selected to lead the Democratic Party against the will of the Democratic Party voters. So this was done against the will of the Democratic Party voters. This was not a democratic choice. There were too many discrepancies in the exit polls when you actually looked at them and analyzed them on Super Tuesday, and you realize that the Democrats just did another coup again. And they've openly argued in court that they are allowed to do that when it comes to their own organization, that they don't have to pick democratically, but they can make it look like the Democratic Party voters have a choice. They can put on a good show, but they've argued in court that they don't have to actually respect the will of the people. And incidentally, they're also running all of the voter election mechanisms in the country and are banning all third-party alternatives from coming into the fore and being allowed to represent themselves. So that's the behavior of a fascist party, in my view, not a free democratic formation. But this is the supposed champion of democracy. We have Joe Biden, and he finds himself doing a speech in commemoration to a third world coup attempt that happened the year prior by the prior president, who was also sympathetic to the same underground terrorist organization that's been brutalizing African Americans. Actually, there's no such thing as an African American. That's accepting a state of slavery. They're Africans, not African Americans. But the brutalization, of course, done by the Ku Klux Klan, and both of these prior presidents in a row have shown prior sympathy to them. But this is supposed to be the champion of democracy, human rights, and the battle against white supremacy. That is the farce. That is the performance we're being given. And of course, you look at NATO setting their eyes on Kazakhstan, looking at the institutional weakness of the leadership and deciding to pounce in coordination with Radio Free Europe, CIA cutout. And how are all these things being taken in by the supposed revolutionaries within the country? I saw some very, very terrible takes by, you know, the followers of the cracker Caleb Maupin. People are openly trying to say there was no insurrection. That was not a coup attempt. They weren't trying to disrupt an election. They weren't trying to keep Donald Trump in power. That was not what was going on. I don't know what you could be smoking to be trying to make that claim, but that's exactly the argument. And they're even doing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweets to claim that she didn't have reason to believe that her life was under threat. Now, I love a good anti-AOC meme as much as anybody, but that one is a terrible take. It's not good. You can't be claiming that her life wasn't in danger on that day because they brought in weapons. They brought in pickaxes. They brought in stuff to break down windows, stuff to break down doors, and stuff to kill people. Actually, they brought in, I believe they brought in weapons like pistols and stuff like that. So, like their goal was to overturn the results of the election. That was the plan. That was the mission. Refusing to accept basic facts about what is going on is not Marxist. And going around and saying just because you know what the party line is on a solid net for international issues and can just regurgitate it doesn't mean that you're a genuine socialist either. That's you can't go around and claim with a straight face that every country that's anti-imperialist is also a socialist country under Marxist-Leninist definition. And that generally any derivative of socialism is acceptable. There are certain derivatives of socialism that are not acceptable. Democratic socialism, for one, the AOC that you were mocking, the National Socialism of Germany, that's not acceptable. Neo-National Socialism is not acceptable either. That's not an acceptable derivative. And National Bolshevism is not acceptable either. But many people that follow the great Reverend Caleb Maupin and Keaton Mansfield want to make excuses for that derivative. But no. There's Marxism-Leninism. You're either a dialectical materialist or you're not. And if you can't look at a basic fact of a situation and just analyze it as it is, then, or if you want to try to make dishonest illusions about the far right in the United States, or make dishonest characterizations about the class character of that insurrection, then you're not a Marxist-Leninist. You're not really. You're just gaslighting. You're trying to fool the public. And you're trying to sweep things under the rug, really to protect the dignity of a nation that should be in disgrace. In many examples I've seen shamelessness on the part of the white left in both the United States and in Canada. Absolute shamelessness. You see, people will go out with a straight face and say, we need to defend the democratic Ukraine. Democratic Ukraine. They came to power in a coup. That government came to power in a coup. A coup initiated by the CIA. And the people that they were using were the Azov Battalion and other Nazi derivatives. Militias that supported the Nazis during World War II. And that's supposedly a National Socialism we're all supposed to accept. It's a derivative of socialism that's acceptable somehow. Using left language as a cover has been a traditional tactic for the far right for generations. That's the first thing they did in Germany. And Mussolini even pretended to be a socialist up until a certain point. You even himself was actually a member of a socialist party. He was playing a con game. That is what the far right does. And if you're not willing to admit that basic fact, then you're in on it. You're in on it. And that's basically what I have to say about the Caleb Maupin people, and the liberals trying to claim with a straight face that the U.S. should be a beacon of democratic rights abroad, and of course Justin Blackface Trudeau coming up on the summit for democracy and just claiming with this straight face that this country should be a leader in the fight for democracy against authoritarianism, which is really what they're criticizing in China. Really is just effective governance and responsible leadership when they're under attack. Like if a country has been placed in a state of war and they effectively fight off the invading forces, you can't call that authoritarian by any measure, but that is what a liberal in a settler colony whose father just massacred, whose father, while he was in power, massacred countless children, would say. That anything that shows effective policy for the masses is somehow using authoritarian methods for effectiveness. If they build a hospital in a few days, it's because it's an authoritarian government that can whip the workers into making it. We don't consider the fact maybe they have a patriotic drive to work hard for a country that they love and respect. That's never factored in. We ignore the popular polls. 90% popularity from Harvard University about the Chinese government. And we ignore the best healthcare system in the American hemisphere, in Cuba. We just say they're authoritarian. If it works for the people, it's authoritarian. But democracy at that point just becomes a code word. It's when Joe Biden says we have to get people to believe in democracy again. What they're really saying is believe in capitalism. It's about the economic system, not necessarily how democratic the political system is. It's just a code word. And these white supremacists are taking you for a ride. The ones trying to infiltrate the CPUSA, the Nazbols, and of course, the champion of democracy, Ku Klux Klan wizard, Joe Biden. And yeah, of course, this champion of democracy can't even save his own people from a pandemic where the effective countermeasures are known because they've been implemented by countries with much less resources and much less technological advancement, and they've proven to be successful. Vietnam, basically a third world country, Cuba, Laos, were able to do something about this pandemic. North Korea, not a single case yet. Granted, they've closed off their borders completely, but they still managed to stop it from happening. And yet, the supposed greatest country on earth and this bastion of democracy, Canada, can't control this pandemic. They've told the public that they can't do anything about this new variant, which incidentally has come up because they've selfishly hoarded vaccines from the rest of the world. But this is supposed to be the two major representatives of democratic freedom and justice. It's important that people need to understand that the politics has failed, absolutely failed. Any of these mainstream parties, liberalism is a failure. Settler colonialism has proven to be vicious, unrelenting towards the working class. And it's shown to be a counter-revolutionary force against the workers. And it's settler colonialism primarily that has to be opposed. In the fight for democracy, actual democracy, and the fight for what would be a dictatorship, the proletariat, which would mean workers controlling the means of production. And our hope as members of the Communist Party of Canada is that white Canada wakes up, looks at what's going on, looks at the hypocrisy of the leadership, and looks at how failed this system actually is. And begins to humble themselves, have some level of shame, look inward, and learn from successful democratic governments around the world. The governments that your government, incidentally, is smearing. And that's it for the news. And with that, I'm going to be putting a very nihilistic D-Genty song where basically talking about the environment. It's a fail. THICC. It's a new single, Wave This World Goodbye. They have another interesting one about Christmas where they don't want to celebrate Christmas, called CKMS. Very interesting. Interesting band. Interesting message. I think someone called it woke gent. Interesting. So with that. So we're going to have the outro, and then we're going to have THICC's Wave This World Goodbye, the new single. And then that'll be the end of the show. We'll see you next week.
We keep calling out when there's no one left to save. We're pointing